Punk was something else. As a cultural movement, it was characterized by a complete disregard for socially acceptable behavior or socially acceptable music, going as far sometimes as to have an outright disdain for life. Call it nihilism or melancholy in its most violent form, but life was often only seen as worth wasting, and autodestruction was the name of the game. Punk was a subversion of the establishment, meant to destroy itself before politics and money could get to it. An anarchistic reappropriation of our own identity. The ironic thing is that the figurative marketing grinder can capitalize on absolutely everything. And punk, in the cultural sense, got caught in it. When a game like Sunset Overdrive says that it's punk, it means post-grinder punk. On the surface, punk's anti-establishment ideals are present, for example the game's antagonist being an amorphous energy drink company, and the empowering nature of the ideology is still there. But it's as far detached from the nihilism and disappointment felt for the punk generation as it can be. In the game, punk and pop culture are eerily similar, often merging into each other without an ounce of self-awareness. Anti-establishment then becomes a backhanded way to sell you a product, in this case the game itself. You still have to give it credit, so Sunset Overdrive might fail or not even try to channel the Sex Pistols, but it does get Bikini Kill right. It might be a detail for some, but it'll be a total game changer for others. Some of this ideology can be seen in the game's character creation, which is a blast to fiddle with and curiously always has pretty great results. The best part of making your own protagonist, though, is that clothing isn't gender specific. Have you always wanted to play a dude with a feminine face wearing a tie and a tutu? Well, the game's not there to judge you, and it'll play along wonderfully with your choices. Whatever you might think of how it treats punk culture, Sunset Overdrive still manages to give you a window to a world where you don't judge people by their looks or apparent gender, and it's great. And there is also a lot of customization in how your character will interact with the world, a lot of weapons and a lot of upgrades you can swap between. But Sunset Overdrive's gameplay, in spite of all its options, feels one note. It has you traversing an open world, grinding on rails, running on walls, and bounce jumping on just about everything that's not regular ground, all the while shooting a diverse group of enemies and collecting a plethora of random stuff. The traversal is great fun, but the combat tends to revolve around shooting a mass of enemies without any thinking or finesse. The game encourages you to always be in motion, first by making you extremely vulnerable if you're stationary, and also by giving you what is essentially a style meter for traversal. Keeping the latter at max makes you deadly in combat. So what most fights amount to is you arbitrarily finding stuff to grind on and jump between so that your meter stays up. Between style bonuses and the generous auto-aim, mindlessly shooting everywhere always feels more effective than using different weapons to play against enemy weaknesses. And it gets worse because of the mission design. The traversal is at its best when you have to move forward, but most missions have you squaring off against waves of enemies in a set area. You just can't play with the terrain when you're stuck bouncing on the same pads and grinding on the same rails. Surprisingly enough, Sunset Overdrive's untapped potential becomes apparent in the chase missions. Not only are they exhilarating, but whereas chase sections in other games tend to be awful, they're among the best parts of the game. It just goes to show what Sunset Overdrive could have been if it didn't rely on the same old tricks too often. And if it all sounds too dismissive of the game, it's because it could have been so much more. Sunset Overdrive is still commendable as it stands now, bright and colorful, extremely pretty, and a joy in short bursts. But it's also shallow and has to be taken at surface level. It's the candy equivalent of a game. Sunset Overdrive feels like the best thing ever at first, but play too much of it and it becomes insufferable. It has suspense! In essence, the game's punishing gameplay is a brushstroke on its canvas. Romance!
I do it a little naked.
I do it without clothes on. Adventure! Sometimes it's easy to forget how modern Hideo Kojima games tend to be. Laughter!
Bleep, bloop, bleep, bloop. He doesn't even dial.
It's been a long time since you used a rotary telephone, huh?
All opinions, all in progress. Castle Couch.